Berserk is truly one of those once-in-a-lifetime stories that it goes beyond just being a manga, as it's truly one of the best fantasy stories ever told. And despite running for almost 35 years at this point, it's also a story that doesn't have an ending yet. And unfortunately, after the unexpected passing of its creator Kentaro Miura, it begs the question then, are we ever finally going to see the end of Berserk? Are we ever going to finally see the conclusion and the end of Guts' suffering? But despite his unfortunate and untimely passing, there are still new chapters coming out for Berserk, so you would think that it's heading towards its conclusion, but that's something that we'll touch upon a little bit later in the video. Like a lot of you may remember, just like me, I remember the day that I just woke up and got on social media like normal, only to be greeted by the unexpected news that Kentaro Miura has passed away. And saying this was unexpected was almost an understatement, as it truly came out of nowhere. And one thing you started seeing a lot of fans talking about at this time is what's gonna happen to this series. It was still being serialized at this point, and pretty recently to his passing, we were finally starting to get a little bit more new chapters coming out. And a few months after his passing, sometime in August, we got the announcement that there's going to be one last chapter releasing that was created by Miura, and that's chapter 364 of Berserk. And to understand where Berserk is heading and if we're ever going to see a conclusion, we have to first analyze chapter 364, as this was initially the final chapter of Berserk. Now, I remember the first time I read this chapter and the raw emotions it gave you as you read this final chapter of one of the best stories ever told. To this day, reading chapter 364 almost gives you a sense of melancholy, but at the same time, a sense of completion. Now, in my opinion, I actually do think that chapter 364 is almost a perfect ending for the Berserk series, and I'll have to explain really why. Now, in my opinion, I feel like Berserk as a series is almost a story of tragedy, of suffering, but at the same time, it's also a story of hope for the future and perseverance. We start this chapter directly after the previous one with the arrival of the Moonlight Boy, still one of the most mysterious characters in all of Berserk. And I feel like the Moonlight Boy is the perfect character to show the character development of Guts throughout the series, as his initial reaction to seeing the Moonlight Boy was calling it a demon and almost rejecting his own child. And I know there's debate on if that's really his child or not, but I'm just gonna assume that it is. And in almost a parallel to that, we don't see Guts do anything of the sort. He's actually now showing off the Moonlight Boy and caring for him in his own way. And we even see Guts and the Moonlight Boy interact with his crew, and it almost feels like this was a final goodbye from the crew as they leave. And this also feels like one of the most perfect ways to see everybody. You see Shurka getting blushed and embarrassed, and Isidro teasing her about it. You see Puck making a joke like always, as he's the comedic relief of the series. You see Farnese taking care of Casca still in an almost sisterhood type of relationship. With the journey that they've had so far, I just love seeing the almost banter in the group and just seeing them all get along together. In a story of so much tragedy, it just feels refreshing to just see the happy moments of its characters. And you also see major developments in the three main characters of the series of Guts, Casca, and Griffith. Now, you can almost make hour-long essays about the last few panels of these three characters, and I think that's one of the beauties of Berserk, but I'll keep it pretty short. With Casca, you see an immense amount of growth in her. The fact that she's no longer in this vegetative state and she's almost back to her normal self. And I say almost because they show that she is still haunted by her former demons, showing that she has came so far, but she still has more to go. With Guts, you see a character that has faced an immense amount of tragedy, more than almost anyone you can ever believe, and he is the type of person that has no reason to trust anybody in the world. Yet, you see someone who has persevered through it all, who has his band and his crew who he does trust. Even when he has almost no reason to rely on anybody, he relies on his crew. You even see someone who has came so far in his journey, but he realizes that he still has more to go, as he's swinging his Dragon Slayer and intentionally drops it, and even tries to throw a shuriken and misses an apple, looking over at the Berserker armor, realizing that he's still not at full strength without it. Guts is in no way a prideful character who thinks that he's larger than he is. He realizes his shortcomings, but he also perseveres through them and does not let those stop him. And Griffith, this last page of Griffith is actually one of my favorite manga panels of all time, and I truly think just one of the best manga panels ever created. The last time Guts truly came face to face with Griffith was all the way back in chapter 178, which released in 2001. And thinking about everything each one of them had been through up until this point, that 20 years in real time, they're finally reuniting. The entire Berserk world has been changed by these two characters, and they finally meet face to face one more time. I can't think of a better way to end the Berserk series. And this is something that I feel like you almost had to experience it at the time that this chapter first released, but the feeling of seeing when it says episode 364, end, and seeing the word end for the Berserk series, how you see in so many mangas that have finally completed, and having that feeling that Berserk is now completed, this epic journey is now done, is truly a moment that you can never replicate. Now, obviously, this isn't the end of Berserk, as there are still chapters releasing, and there's a good reason why it's continuing on past this point. But you have two different sides of the Berserk fandom following this. You have the people who think it should have ended with 364, and the people who appreciate and think it should continue on past that. But in order to understand both sides and see why it even continued past this point, as 364 truly was the last one that was created by Miura, we have to look into who is continuing it on. Now, Kentaro Miura was almost destined to create one of the best mangas of all time, as he was even drawing manga as early as when he was in elementary school. And in his senior year of high school, he met an important person, Koji Mori, who manga fans will know as creating one of the best fighting mangas I've ever read of Holy Land. So he's a successful manga artist himself. Now, Miura and Mori grew up together almost, collabing on several different manga projects. But even beyond the manga, they were truly just close friends. Mori even noted that he was freeloading at Miura's house, as he would always stay over there and eat their food and things like that. So after Miura's passing, there would be almost no more perfect candidate to continue on the Berserk series other than Mori himself. And as Miura's best friend, Mori even stated in an interview that he thought Miura would be angry if he didn't do anything, so he made a decision to continue on his series. Now, this is when you get into the two sides of how Berserk is going to continue. You have the people who believe that Berserk cannot continue without Miura. Miura is the perfect author to create this world and create this story. Berserk was created when Miura was only 23 years old, and with him passing at 54 years old, he created Berserk through his entire adult life. And one thing Berserk is known for is its long hiatuses, as Miura would sometimes take breaks for almost years at some points. But although the chapters took long to come out, one thing that was very clear was the dedication that Miura put to each chapter and each panel of his series. Even with the famous story being that one of the editors had to get on him because when it switched to digital, he was going so far as to edit each pixel of the manga. Berserk was truly Miura's creation that he cared about deeper than any, and he cared not only to write but also to illustrate the best story he ever could, which is why people believe that 364 should be the finale of the series, as this is the last one that Miura wrote, and with Berserk being truly Miura's series, that it cannot continue on without him. Now, on the other side, you have the group of people who just want to see the resolution to so many things in this great story that are just left unresolved now, with several plot points just not having a finish yet, such as who is Skull Knight, where did he come from, what is his past. We have so much to learn about the God Hand, who are these entities, where did they come from, and what is their plan for this universe. We have to see the development of the Black Swordsman crew and what's going to happen to these people that Guts is training, as well as on the opposite, what's going to happen to Falconia, what's going to happen to Griffith's crew, and most importantly, we have to see the final resolution of the epic battle between Guts and Griffith. And with new chapters coming out, it now begs the question, are we ever going to see the answer to these questions? Are we ever going to see the ending of Berserk? Now, since Mori is spearheading the continuation of the Berserk manga, he has went on record to say that it's in its quote-unquote folding phase and it should take no more than 10 years to see the ending of Berserk. And to that I say, it's possible, but I'm going to be honest, it's unlikely. Now, Berserk under Miura's direction was known for its long hiatuses, and even with Mori spearheading it now, it's known for its long hiatuses still, to the point to where I honestly don't even keep up when there's new chapters coming out. Every few months or so, you just kind of see a new chapter pop up and you're just reminded that Berserk is still continuing on. Since Miura's passing in May of 2021, we've only had 11 new chapters of Berserk released. In almost 2 years, only 11 chapters, which would put it at almost a bi-monthly release schedule, but that's not even the truth, as we haven't had a last chapter since November of 2023, and with it being March of 2024 as I'm making it, that puts it as a 4-month hiatus already, and we don't even know when the next chapter is gonna be. But even with the bi-monthly release schedule, in the next 10 years, that means we would only get about 60 chapters, and there's no way this series can wrap up that quickly. Now, I still do want to have hope, of course. This is a series that myself, and I'm sure a lot of you love, and would love to see the answer to all these questions, and love to see the final resolution of this story that you've been reading. However, it's unlikely, but it is still possible. And I think if anybody is to continue the series, it definitely has to be Mori, as he was the closest to Miura, and I think he would know best on what Miura planned for the series, although it will not be written by Miura. So whether or not 364 is technically the last chapter of Berserk, or whether or not we may actually see the finale of Berserk, I can at least say that this is an amazing manga to read so far, and I'm glad I had the chance to experience it.